The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. This is a podcast designed by writers for writers on the journey to being published. Joined Mandra Biscornet.
It was so healthy and nutritious.
Deborah Monk.
Can we open each podcast with a dance number?
Shelly Devlin.
It was so full of inspiration and sparkles.
Every Tuesday morning live on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to catch the podcast anytime on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. It's time to be inspired, feel empowered, and be well with the Writer's Block Podcast NH.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra.
I'm Debbie.
And I'm Shelly. Thank you for joining us at the Writer's Block, where our mission is to inspire, empower, and to help people be well. On our show today, we're going to be talking about plot points, significant turning points in your story, and scenes that move your story along. So Deb is going to help us define what exactly those points are.
Well, it's helpful to have kind of a nice template for telling your story, and so a lot of people use Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. And what that involves is a character that starts in the ordinary world and is called to some sort of adventure. He often refuses the adventure first and then has to cross that threshold where there's no going back. And that is the first plot point. So the first plot point is when he goes from the ordinary world where things are just the way they are, and he has resisted taking action but has come to the point where, okay, he has to, and it kind of turns the story in a whole new direction. So then there's the middle part where often there are tests, there are allies, there are enemies, there's kind of the approach to the innermost cave. The midpoint would tend to be the kind of big ordeal. And then toward the second part of that is there's the reward, or seizing the sword, picking up the sword, and finally, doing the full battle. There's also the black moment, which is not considered a plot point, but that is where all seems lost, where it seems like there's just no way this person's going to win. In Rocky, there's that point in the fight where, the first 5 rounds, you think, oh, he's sort of holding his own, and then the guy's just wailing on him, and you think, okay, he can't see, he can't breathe, he's down,
no
he's
hope.
up, he's down, he's up. Right, there's no way he's going to win this. So that's the black moment where it seems like the journey is not going to be made. But then there is the second plot point where it turns back into where it goes to the third act. And in the third act, there is the road back, the resurrection, and the return with the elixir, meaning the characters come back with the answer, whether it's a physical thing like Rocky winning, in Rocky he didn't actually win, but where he comes back with the knowledge or
whatever it is that they need for that resolution.
The resolution of and the accomplishment of whatever the original set out was. Yes. Yeah. So those would be the plot points. The plot points are what turn from Act 1 to Act 2. And then the second plot point is when you turn from the middle section, which is the longest section, and to the third. So if you were to break it down mathematically, the first act is roughly 25% of the story. The second act is 25 to 75. So that's 50. That's the biggest part. And that's where you also have the midpoint, isn't generally in the middle of that. So 50% of the story. And then the last 25% is Act 3.
Okay.
So really it sounds like this podcast is less about the point, getting to the point, and more about getting your act straight.
What's the point? What's your point,
Jonathan?
What's the point?
Yeah, what's your point? What's your first plot point? How about your second?
So a good visual might be kind of like a tent, and you have 3 poles holding up the tent. So you have like a first plot point, you have your midpoint, and then you have your second plot point, but it's actually the third piece.
Right.
Resolution,
yes.
Yeah,
but if you don't
good.
have that middle point, you're going to have this like sagging tent or story right in the middle.
Which is a place that a lot of writers suffer. You kind of get started in that beginning and it's all fun and you're going. Right. Then you've got that 50% in the middle where you have to. And so sagging middle is definitely a problem for most writers.
Why do you think that is? Why is that?
You lose momentum, you get tired.
Just with it.
A lot has to happen.
How many plot points are in a story? Does it matter?
I think it's typically these 3 points.
Okay.
The first one, The second one is called the midpoint, and then the second plot point is the third. And that's a traditional structure? I don't know.
Yeah, it's very traditional. And
Yeah.
you can almost see it in almost every story. Because if you can't, it's not probably a very good story.
Well, I'm thinking of in TV, the This Is Us. I feel like there's a million plots in that story.
Well, there can be twists and turns in the plots but there's probably those 3 in each episode, you mean?
In each episode, it feels like there are several different stories going on in each episode.
Right.
Right? You guys have watched it. Deb, you love that.
I do love that. It gets back to, as far as the TV series goes, you could talk about each individual episode, or you could talk about the whole thing.
arc,
And they have to have
sure.
both of those. So in any story, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Right.
So if you look at This Is Us, because they go back and forth in time, it's going to be a little bit more confusing, but there's definitely a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's just like Grey's Anatomy. If you look at the stories that they choose to tell, they go along with the theme. So when you look at This Is Us, when you're talking about the present and the past, there's some relationship between
Right,
those stories. They're
right.
not just random.
Right.
And that's the interweaving. Going back and forth in time certainly makes it more complicated, and I think that's one of the reasons that show is so phenomenal, because they have done that so well.
Right.
That certainly is not easy. It would be a little bit more difficult to see this, but it's definitely there. Beginning, middle, end.
Right. So let's just review, because we went kind of fast there. That first plot point is kind of dropping a bomb on that main character.
It's the point where they decide to go on the journey.
Okay.
Whatever the journey is. If we go back to Karate Kid, I think he was, and I don't remember the story very well.
Why don't we just stick to Rocky, because you seem to have an obsession.
I do love Rocky. But there's the first plot point is when it turns and there's no going back.
Right.
When he's finally engaged, when he's making progress.
Who's the fighter? Who says, Rocky, I want to fight you? That's like that. Rocky's kind of a bum, and his coach keeps telling him he's worthless and all that. And
He's
then
almost
Apollo.
good
Is it Apollo
It's
Creed?
Apollo Creed.
Yeah.
He's almost good enough to carry the spit bucket.
Right. But then
Wow.
Apollo Creed comes in and says, I want to fight you. And now it's like, whoa, now I need to really.
Why did Apollo Creed come in and say, I want to fight
I
you?
can't
Because he
remember.
needed a hook for the fight, because he had won so many times, so handedly. He was clearly the top contender. There
So
were
what was
no
his
other
hook?
contenders in the field, and this was the best in the world is going to fight the Italian Stallion, and he thought he could take this title, Italian Stallion, and make a superstar out of
market
him, and
it,
make
yeah.
this super fight, black versus white. I mean, there's all this stuff going
Yeah.
on behind the scenes on that plot point.
Well,
Right.
I mean, we could use the story of Sylvester Stallone having Rocky turned into a movie as a hero's journey. How, he tried to sell it and he couldn't sell it, and he was down and out on his luck, and he was married and he had a son who had some issues. And then finally, a studio's going to buy it. I think they were going to give him $50,000, which in those days was a lot of money. And he said, but I want to star in it. And they said, no. And so he lost that deal. So talk about a hero's journey.
Right.
And yet eventually he found a
said
studio
yes.
that would say yes, right?
Right. So then we have the midpoint, and this is kind of like the biggest. Is this the most important one, or it's just the one that people get stuck on?
I think it's the easy one to get stuck on.
Yeah.
Do we have a good definition of what the midpoint is?
Kind of like when the character turns from being reactive and reacting to whatever that first inciting incident was to being proactive.
It's when the
really
switch
taking it
goes
on.
off.
Like, I gotta do this.
Adrian's laying in the hospital bed. Rocky's not really into the whole fighting thing. He's not going to do it. He's kind of haphazardly going through his workout. And then she comes out of her coma and says, win, Rock, win. And now the music changes. And right when that music starts,
Yeah.
that's the switch.
Wow, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That was a great
I'm glad
example.
that you prepped for this podcast,
Yes.
Jonathan. Good
We
job.
just happen to pick a movie that I'm into, a
Yeah.
series
Right.
of movies.
If we pick Rocky or Batman, we're good to go.
Right.
That's right. Where does he get those wonderful toys?
And then the second plot point is where you said they get the elixir or whatever is needed for that
Well,
resolution.
That's in the third part, right? That's-
Correct.
yeah.
Called the second plot point, but it's actually the third, which is
And
cognitively hard to follow. But yeah.
Right. I think for me, there's called the black moment, which is when, and I tend to think of that as the second plot point.
Okay.
That is the moment where it's got a turn.
Where he finds the eye of the tiger in Rocky 3. He's about to fight Mr. T.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's the
When Rocky when he wipes the blood out of his eyes and starts, wailing on Apollo Creed, that's when it turns. The black moment is right before, so that black moment is the plot point. When all is lost, you don't think they're going to make it.
Okay.
That's the second plot point or black moment, and then it turns, and he starts to make the journey
I think
back.
that's
to
why
recovery.
Rocky is so good. They've got like 8 black moments through the entire movie.
They do have a lot of black moments and black eyes.
Not really. They don't have a lot of black moments.
The story has a very impressive arc. There's
Yes.
little mini stories inside the major story.
Well, there's a reason. It's not like there's never been a boxing movie made before
Right.
or after.
But that one was exceptional.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
do you plan these ahead of time?
These are integral to every single story. Every person should sit down and absolutely have a chart with all their plot points written out before they write.
However, Deb does not do any of that.
Exactly.
I was going to say the self-proclaimed pantser over here can't possibly
Puzzler.
can't possibly plan these out.
No, I don't.
Oh, gosh.
I should. And yes.
So they just sort of happen for you?
I'm not going to say they happen. You make that sound like they just naturally, I sit down in my Victoria's Secret nightgown and
Your muse comes and says, "Here you go, black moment, Deb."
Yeah. No, that's not, it does not happen that way. For me, the way it happens a lot of times is it isn't until I'm writing that I realize later when I get to that black moment, that a lot of times is when I say, oh, now I know. And so then I have to go back and I have to see, are these there? Sometimes they're there. Sometimes they're too small and I have to build them up better. But yes.
But no, you don't plan them.
Right. I don't.
She sounded convincing, but
Yes.
no, not so much.
No, if we should do a show on character-driven versus plot-driven story too, because that would make a difference. I mean, this is essentially the character's plot of the story.
Well, that's a great idea. We should do a show on that.
I think we should. Yeah, maybe whenever. But
Do you think that there's more work involved in not planning ahead? Kind of having your outline, because you now have to connect so many dots, and you may have to get rid of stuff that you already wrote. Whereas if you started with a plot plan and kind of laid things out with your acts, and okay, this is what's going to happen, this is the story arc.
Are you married to her? Are you married to her?
So no one would ever say you write at one time. I don't think. I've never met anyone who does that.
Round nosing will get you everywhere.
So is your question, do you waste time by not planning?
It just seems like it would take longer.
Of course. Absolutely.
Because a lot of people do plan this out.
Yes.
They have those plots and those
Those are called professional writers that do that.
I have a friend in my very first writing group. We have a meeting for, I don't know, maybe 20 years, Barb Wallace. And I mean, she comes with a notebook. And it's sometimes it's handwritten in a notebook. Sometimes it's of the plot points, of the turning points, and she wants certain things to happen by page 25, and she makes them happen by page 25. And I look at it, and I love it, and I despise it at the same time. I want to reach across the table, crumple it up, and eat it, and then spit it out on the floor.
It's a mess, and she has to put it all back together again.
And
a little aggressive over there.
It really is.
Being a little aggressive.
Sorry, Barb. I've never told Barb that.
Barb,
Hopefully
I've
she
loved you
doesn't
for
listen
20
to this.
years, but I just wanted to eat your pages.
Yes.
Now, what kind of writing does Barb do? What is her genre?
She writes romance, which is what she's always wanted to write.
Okay.
And does very well. And she also
So fiction, still fiction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what about? Because we're not writing fiction,
Right.
Shell. So
Right. So is it different when you're writing a memoir where the plot is? Because it's about characters, and then you have to build this plot in.
I don't think it's different.
You don't think it's different?
No, I think you're gonna have those moments where we have to hit this spot, we have to tell this story, we have to do this. So you could lay it all out in advance before you get to the writing. To me, anyways, making an outline, although it's a pain in the ass, at first it gives you the
roadmap.
The roadmap,
where
and
you're
now
heading.
you know you're going to write this story. It gives you a direction rather than just sitting down and writing. You end up writing more that you're going to throw away without the outline, in my opinion.
Shelley's is a little different, though, with it being vignettes almost, with these.
Right.
So it's not one whole continuous.
Well, in a way, you could look at it like a TV series.
Maybe each
one has
chapter
its
is
own-
going to maybe fall into that.
But then overall,
structure.
she's putting it into a book, so
Yeah.
it has to have both.
It's going to have to have a structure.
Right.
You may as well, in my opinion, get the structure portion out of the way, and now you can focus on the writing at the end, as opposed to pouring it out on the page and then going, you know what, this one doesn't work. You would have known it wouldn't fit the arc of the book doing the plot line.
Well, and
I disagree because when
That
we were
was a big
working
part of
on
your
the Shirley story, how do you put a plot into a story that, and different with Shirley, it was obviously about the character. And we didn't understand what the
she
plot
still
was
thinks that
until
stupid story is about Shirley.
She keeps trying to sell us on that.
Wow.
I've only heard it once, and I know it's your grandma.
I don't mean stupid story. I
not
mean
a stupid story.
No, it's not
But
that at
how
all.
do you put a plot into, like, how is there a plot? Is a plot always a tragedy?
Okay, well, here's a good thing about plot, which helped me a lot. Somewhere along the way, I read this or heard this from somebody. A husband dies, and then the wife dies. That's not a plot. A husband dies, then the wife dies of grief. That's a plot, because a plot is scenes or actions related to each other. A husband dies and a wife dies. You don't know how, you don't know
Such
why,
a
you don't
good
know
point.
if they're related.
Such a good point.
But it's one thing to the next to the next. So they all have, it has to have that tie of interdependency or reactivity to each other. And that's what plot is.
And your stories have that. Like the Shirley story has that.
It's getting that.
Yes.
It's getting that.
Well, and
yeah.
for you,
It's
couldn't-
always had it. It's just a matter of
The writer has
writing
to,
it.
Right.
Isn't the switch for you that dark moment when you realized that it really wasn't about her, that it was about you?
She hasn't realized that,
No,
though. She's
I'm
still
not there
calling
yet.
it the
Oh.
I'm not
Shirley
there yet.
story.
I just
there yet.
assumed that once it was on the podcast, we had realized it. Once it was said out loud, that we've
It's
all...
not that easy,
we're all on the
Jonathan.
same
Not
page.
that
It's
easy.
not that easy.
It's not that easy. Because, resistance. That we should definitely, somebody make a note. We have to do a show on resistance.
Okay.
We could do a month-long
We're
on
not doing a
resistance.
month-long.
Easily. Oh, there's so many versions.
I'm resisting that idea. We're not
Exactly.
doing a
All right, we'll do
month-long.
2 months.
Mandra, by the way, we had a little meeting at Shelly's house about the podcast. And
You were
Without
invited.
me? I
yes,
was not invited.
well, we elected you the leader. So
Oh,
if you
okay.
say we're not doing a month-long thing, it's not
See?
happening.
It's not happening.
You elected me a leader in my absence of
Yes,
not being
well, we
there.
did
Correct.
do that.
Yeah, so by default,
Yes,
really.
but she doesn't get
We
to...
all felt lost without you. That's really what
What,
it
did
was.
they go to your house? Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
All right, I'm going to do a show
I'm
by
not
myself
missing-
called Resistance.
I'm not missing any more of these meetings where I get
You get
I get
nominated.
to do things.
Your workload is only slightly larger now. We'll talk about it after the show.
I
Sounds good.
think it's basically what she's been doing. She's been doing a great job. So
That's
where
why we
were
call
we?
So
the
yes,
leader,
there are
yeah.
plot points in memoirs. Whether it's written kind of like mine is, in more chronological, or whether it's going to be each story that you've selected and having that all tie together.
Right. Because a good story, whether...
And maybe we'll just have to focus on your ordering of the stories.
Hugely.
Right? So that middle point is really held up there well, and supports the rest of the book.
Well, we'll see on Thursday when you take a look at it. I might just run it through. When I was doing my research, I found that there's a plot generator online that you plug in your answers, like multiple choice, and
Unbelievable.
it creates you a story. You go, make me a story.
I think these are cheating. I think that's a cheating thing.
Well,
hey,
it would be
listen.
it would. Did you do it?
I didn't do it, but I'm going to plug it in.
You should do
I'm
it.
gonna
I'm just
plug it in
curious.
and
Let's see what it comes
Well,
up
I
with.
did it, and then the story didn't make sense at all, because you can also, I wanted to see what it would do. You can automatically hit a suggest button, so you don't even have to come up with the answer yourself. You can do suggest,
No,
and it will
no,
autofill.
no.
Good one. Does it give you? Does it say plot point? Is that part of?
It has characters, and it has what's the conflict, and
Okay.
it has what's the resolution,
Okay.
and it has all your
Conflict.
sight and sound and all of that. Yeah, it's kind of
Wow.
cool.
We should try it.
All right. We can try it by Thursday and we'll see.
3 girls started a podcast. I think
We'll have
though,
our
going,
results on next show.
Yeah. Going back to your question, if a good story,
Right.
if you're telling a story, if I'm telling a story about what happened to me, or if I'm telling the story of a well-behaved woman coming undone,
Sure.
whatever I'm doing, it's a story, and if it's told well, it should feel real. When you just going back to Rocky, Rocky sort of it represents his life. His Sylvester Stallone's story was represented in Rocky, so he's so related. He's so part of that character, and the reason is because it's a good story. So
I think a plot is always something that you never see coming. Like when I've read
Isn't that a
books
plot
or when I've
twist?
watched. Is that a plot twist?
That would
Yeah.
be a twist.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you're slapping your knee and looking at the TV like, no, that
didn't see
did
that
not
happen.
Yeah,
just
that's a
happen.
twist.
That's a twist.
Okay.
And it could be a plot point.
Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah. And I think but you're still going to have this structure that we
This
talked
story
about. With
structure, yes.
Of the plot points and the midpoint.
There goes
Yeah.
Mandra bringing us back to structure.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
love
Structure.
that.
Speaking of structure, we're going to do a project update.
Alrighty.
Because that's next in our podcast structure. Do we all have one?
I do.
Everyone
I do.
I do.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Well, then this will be easy.
Yeah.
Shell, do you want to start with your update?
So my update is that I decided I'm trying to calculate how much time I had to write. So I calculated the amount of hours in a week, 168. 56 of those hours I'm sleeping. 30 of those hours I'm at my first job. 21 hours I'm eating, showering, and getting dressed. 10 hours I'm driving. And then 60 hours if I have the second job, which leaves me 1 hour, which does not include prepping for this podcast, walking the dog, sexy time with the husband, dishes, vacuuming, dusting, or weeding the gardens. So
You're doing
I
great.
pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
Like, I'm getting some writing done.
Yeah.
Oh, and I get the violins.
Oh, that's beautiful music too.
That's great. So I'm plugging along. That's my update. I am plugging
Great.
along with
Well,
my
for only
with
having
my
1 hour
1
to do
hour.
that,
You're doing really
I'm
well.
impressed. Yes.
Yes.
Deb?
How is it that you had time to figure out how much time that you have to write when you could have just been writing during that
That literally took me
It cut
like
into
a
sexy
minute.
time.
And she got up early that day. Shame.
She only got
Should have
7 hours and 45 minutes of sleep that
Right?
morning. Yeah. Deb, do you have an update?
I do. I believe it's been just recently. My very first book trailer went live on Facebook. The good news is it's done well, and I'm going to brag. It's amazing.
It's really good.
It's really good. Unfortunately, Facebook stripped the music from the second half, so that's just something, live and learn the hard way.
Live and learn.
They stripped it for copyright?
Listen to your
Yes.
husband next
Copyright
time.
issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's that. I'm going to put it on YouTube, and fingers crossed it doesn't get stripped that way. And then eventually I will put it on my website as well.
Yeah,
so I
'cause
know
your
on my
website,
website
I'd like to see
you'll be able
that.
to see the whole thing.
Right.
With all the music. Yeah.
That's awesome. And our favorite fan
Yes,
is in
Brenda.
it.
Yes, she did so well.
When are we going to have her on the show? We need to get Brenda on
Well,
the show.
I
Well, when
mentioned
we're
to
going
her
to do it
when
as
you're
a trailer
away,
show when we talk about
Yes.
book trailers.
but
We'll
she was
have to have
bummed
her as a guest.
that she wants to meet you.
Yeah,
So
she has
was
to be
bummed.
here when Shelly's here.
All right. I thought she was coming the week that Shelly wasn't here, but whatever. Okay.
All right.
Mandra, your update.
My update is I got an email from my editor.
You didn't tell us.
I know, I held it in during our prep meeting.
Yes.
Manuscript is going to be heading back my way.
Oh my goodness, with all the tabs.
Yep.
And the pen.
And the memo and the edits and all that good stuff.
But she's using the editor that I have, and it's very clear because he works on hard copy. So it's not going to be the computer trying to follow arrows and things.
Right.
His work is very
But doesn't that seem fast? I thought I had more time.
apparently
Now I got to get back to work.
ask Shelly. She'll do the calculation and figure out how much
I got to
time
figure
you
some
have.
hours out because that is very exciting. I'm excited to see what the edits
Oh,
are
heck
and
yeah.
what he's written, and I was a little like, now I have to get back to work on that.
Yeah.
It was a nice little vacation, but
Well, you did say the end of summer, and
I know
Darby's
and
back to school, so it's
snuck
time.
up on me, I guess. Yeah. So I'll be updating about that as soon as I get it. I just can't believe it's getting mailed back my way.
That sounds good.
Well, thank you everybody for listening, and please check out the Writer's Block NH Facebook page, the Writer's Block podcast on your favorite podcast catcher, and may you be inspired, feel empowered, and be well. Attention cigar smokers or even friends of a cigar smoker. If you're looking to relax with a nice premium cigar or looking for a great gift for a cigar smoker, this is the gift that keeps on giving. Our friends at twoguyscigars.com have created the Cigar of the Month Club. For just $19.99 per month, you or a friend will receive 4 different premium handmade cigars every month, and shipping and handling is included.
Contact twoguyscigars.com. That's the number 2, guyscigars.com, and go to the Cigar of the Month Club. You can stop anytime because there's no contract, but you won't. This is a tremendous deal for our listeners. Go to twoguyscigars.com. That's the number 2guyscigars.com and click the Cigar of the Month Club.
At the same time, if you want to learn more about the cigars you receive each month, you can smoke along with them on our own podcast called The Cigar Authority. Sit back, relax, and enjoy a nice premium cigar from our friends at twoguyscigars.com.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.